welcome into another week of Dropping Dimes. I'm your host, Matt Knost, and we are here to discuss all the NBA action that has transpired since we last spoke. We are in the middle of the conference finals. Each side has played 4 games apiece. The Celtics and Heat are knotted at 2 games apiece, and the Warriors have a 3-1 game lead on the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks last night were playing not to be swept, and they managed to stave off that sweep. So congrats to the Dallas Mavericks first and foremost in a hellacious night in Texas last night. We won't touch on what happened outside of the arena. We're just going to talk about what's inside and what happened in there. Rain delays, apparently the second time this has happened this season. I didn't know about the first one. Somehow it slipped through the cracks during the entirety of the season, and I didn't know that they had this problem once before. But the shot of Mark Cuban fuming on the sideline as they are just waiting for this to be cleared up, I can't imagine how many heads are going to roll today. But whoever was in charge of fixing that last time definitely lost their job last night, and potentially several other people. But it was another blowout. Although the Warriors climbed back in and they outscored the Mavs by 19 points in the fourth quarter, it was another lopsided victory for one team. And we've had quite a few of these this year. It's made these conference finals not as enjoyable overall. And there's I can't remember whose Twitter account that I saw it on, but the most blowouts in a playoffs is from the 2016 playoffs. So we're not there yet, but this year is inching closer and closer. It would be nice if one of these games just came down to the wire. Now, there was the game where Golden State climbed back in and won, but by and large, these contests have been settled well before the buzzer. And it's just a fait accompli. And it's not, it's just, we're all longing for. I'm watching these games sitting here thinking, God, I wish Memphis had made it past, because they had at least 2 games apiece in both their previous series, if not, 3 and 4 games where it's one overhand right after another, and each side it's just a slugfest until the very end, and it comes down to a final play. It would be nice if one of these games managed to do that. Now, it's not to say that it's not enjoyable still, but it does deflate your overall experience when one team gets out to an insurmountable lead and manages to hold on to that lead for the duration of the game, by and large. And it's happened several times throughout the entirety of the conference finals so far. Not the best outcome for the NBA. I'm not sure what exactly they can do. I mean, my mind started racing of, what if you just limited the number of threes you're allowed to take? So you can take 30 threes in a game or something like that. Although that's not ever going to happen, but at least it would make it interesting. Teams would be forced to start shooting 2s and going into the paint more. But I'm not going to slag off just because there's been a decent conference finals. We'll move on from that. We'll discuss last night's game and the other conference finals, and I look forward to tonight and then the next game from the Mavs and the Warriors. But the game last night, so there's a stat floating around of, it was either projected assists or potential assists from Luka. And it's in the ballpark of 14 and 15 assists a game is what he technically could be averaging if his teammates around him were hitting shots. And especially in game 3, I mean, everybody was cold that he was passing to. Bullock went over 10 from the field, 0 of 7 from 3. Dorian Finney-Smith has quite possibly been the most consistent, shooter on those spot-up attempts for the Warriors. But Strus was having a bad, opening to these conference finals, and on down the line, Jalen Brunson's been good, but he's also disappeared at times. So Luka just needed something else, and you see that stat of, well, the potential assists he could be having, and it made me think of that JJ Redick clip that was floating around after he was on First Take, saying that if Luka was playing with more top tier talent like all these other teams, imagine what what the Mavericks would be doing, because he's playing with second round picks, cast offs from other teams, unsigned free agents, former G League players that have matured into getting playing time in the league. And by and large, he's right about where a lot of these players matriculated from. And Luka's still wildly effective. And so long as those guys can hit shots, then suddenly the Mavs are going to be a real problem for the Warriors. Do I think the Mavs can come back and win this? No, I still think the Warriors, with the amount of shooting and depth that they have, I like the Warriors, and I've liked the Warriors since this thing started. I did say in my head, I don't know if I said it on the show, but Warriors in 6. So the Mavs just need to win one more to keep them honest, but at least they got the sweep out of the way. I don't ever want to see a sweep in a conference finals. I just don't. So long as it's not my team, but my team hasn't been here in a long, long time, so I don't really have to worry about that. And on the flip side, for the Warriors, I keep watching these games, and part of me thinks that Klay Thompson shouldn't play in the first half, and he should just play in the second half, because it's like clockwork. He is not hitting his shots in the first, and then we start the third, and then suddenly Klay is burying, 2 to 5 shots in the third quarter, and he's just erupted, and you can suddenly start trusting again. I wonder if getting him down those post touches that he used to get quite a bit of, that might help him get into a rhythm to see the ball go into the bucket a little earlier in the game, to feed him a couple times in the post, get him, when he was matched up on like Jalen Brunson, feed him the ball, get him down low, and he'll do a turnaround on the baseline. And it's a consistent shot for him. But pretty much like clockwork, second half starts, Klay heats up. And the only one that's been truly consistent has been Steph for the Warriors. Looney's going to give you all the hustle in the world, but Jordan Poole is sometimes passive. Draymond, you can't really rely on for the points. Otto Porter was out last night. And then you just move on down the line. And Curry, to me, has been the most consistent, the one that I'm more than willing to trust. And in these high leverage moments, even though they've got a bevy of shooters out there, I keep defaulting to maybe we should just have Curry take that shot, even though that is anathema to what the Warriors do, the system in place. It's movement, it's finding the open shot, and everybody gets to eat on this offense, which is good because it builds a camaraderie within the players and whatnot. But there were a couple shots from Jordan Poole last night, where one specifically where he pulled up, they had just gotten to the other side, and granted they're down, but they had started pushing a little bit of momentum, slowly but surely inching back into this, and shot a 3 with no rebounders whatsoever in place. And just like, God, that seems like a really dumb shot right now. but he's also shown flashes of just being able to get white hot. So, you can't use one game as your only metric because the sample size is too shallow. And if you look at the entire course of the playoffs and the regular season, he can do it. There are just moments where watching, you're like, God, I really only want Curry to shoot right now, even though then the defense is just going to double and triple team him. But then you just find somebody else rolling to the rim. That was one other thing about the Mavs last night. Numerous players were putting it on the deck last night and getting into the paint. And you need to force, because the previous game, it's like they were settling for threes and they were missing their threes. And last night they were hitting the threes, which just opened up the lanes to the paint. But you could also look at it from the inverse by getting to the paint and doing some athletic plays down there and seeing the ball go through the hoop, maybe give you a little more confidence when it came to the three because, you're playing with house money a little bit. The pressure was off. You've already built up a little bit of a lead. So just keep shooting and you're playing more relaxed and fluid. They looked like they did against the Suns in Game 7. But to see it's Bertans 2 straight games where he's made a drive to the hoop and got a dunk in the last game and got fouled on one last night. But him, Finney-Smith, Bullock, several guys that you're not accustomed to seeing try and put it on the floor and get into the paint, and successful. They were successful, by and large doing that. So if the Mavs can have a little bit more balance in the offense as opposed to fully flashing 4 guys out to the wings and then letting Luka cook until he can get, 2 feet into the paint and the defense is forced to collapse down to try and stymie that easy 2-point shot and kick out. Perhaps on that, instead of settling for that 3, the defender is even remotely close, pump fake, drive it in, get the defense to collapse a little bit more. Unless you have a seam to take the shot, pass it back out and get an even better look from 3. But the ball movement looked a little bit more crisp last night for the Dallas Mavericks. And, the Warriors basically had a bad game until the fourth quarter. And that is the one testament for the Warriors. They're not going to give up. They're going to continue to fight. Whereas on the flip side, in the East, it seems like once one team gets a large enough lead, the other team becomes somewhat deflated. Whereas the Warriors, we've seen them climb back. They did it against Memphis. They did it in this series already once before. They have that fight. And once they started chipping away at the overall lead and they got it down to, I think 8 was the closest, I genuinely believed that they could make this a real game. But every time, once it got down to right around 10 points, they would make a bucket and the Mavs would make a corresponding equal value bucket. So if the Warriors hit a 2, the Mavs turn around and hit a 2. And it was just kind of like that back and forth for the final couple minutes of the game. But credit where credit is due. The Mavs came out, played with a sense of urgency. And, at halftime, the guys were saying that the rain delay was going to affect the team that was up. And that was not the case. Third quarter went out and was all Mavs, even though that's where the Warriors have feasted for a long time now. They have been a third quarter team where they make whatever adjustments they need to, and suddenly they have either climbed back into the game or they've just increased their lead. And they do it so routinely, you almost take it for granted. But it'll be, interesting to see. Game 5 is back in Chase, and the Warriors are yet to lose in San Francisco. Will the Mavs be able to keep them honest and bring it back to Dallas? I can't wait to watch that. My money is on the Warriors closing it out. It's 4-1, and they get the rest, which should benefit them considering they've got a slightly older team. Their 3 main guys are in their 30s. And then you got Looney, who Still baffles me that Looney's only 26 because he looks 45. Like he looks a couple of years younger than Haslam. It doesn't have any of the gray, but still, he's looked like a grown man since the first time he suited up to play in the NBA. And every time, I go to his basketball reference, just look at his stats because his rebounding and hustle has kept the Warriors in the playoffs, especially since he really started getting playing time in the Memphis series, which I figured the days of Looney playing were more than likely past for this, Warriors team. But these high leverage moments, they bring him back in, and he is a hustle machine. I mean, he didn't dominate last night like he has in the past, but he at least made the Mavs work for the rebounds that they got. And I don't know if the Mavs are going to be able to shoot like that from three again, especially on the road. We shall see. But that next game is going to be very interesting. And I'm looking forward to it. I would assume, the Warriors are going to take it because they've got just such a slightly more balanced blend of where they're getting their points from, which they're, to some degree, what Daryl Morey wants, which is 3 and key. Now, every once in a while, you'll see a mid-range, like elbow jumper from Clay or a floater from Curry. But by and large, it is we're either getting within 5 feet of the cup or we're taking a 3. But they do make a concerted effort to get down into the cup. So we'll see. Will the Mavs have an answer for it? Jason Kidd has impressed me thus far. And even I'm curious if the Warriors will keep changing up their defense. Because at this point, the Mavs have now seen it for 4 games. So when they get thrown a 2-3 or a 3-2 zone or a box and one, and then it switches back to a man, it's not as befuddling as it might have been in games 1 and 2 because you're just not as accustomed to this. But now that you've seen it a few times, you're like, oh, when they switch to this, okay, here are the actions that we're going to go to. We're going to try and feed the ball into the elbow and turn that player into kind of the crux passing pivot point for the offense, although they don't do that as much. But will all these defensive scheme switching for the Warriors continue? And then the Mavs have had answers for it in the past couple games, but last night especially. But I will say hitting your shots makes any defense pointless or irrelevant, not pointless. So long as you're hitting from that good a clip from 3, then it's not a whole lot that anybody can do about it. I think the officiating in the other series has been wonkier, but last night it was curious because there are certain plays where guys are just getting hammered, and then other ones where it seemed kind of ticky-tack on that one. Not sure why you're calling this, although it's such a quick heat of the moment type of situation that job has got to be so difficult to do. But yeah, so game 5 tomorrow night at the Chase Center. I'm going to go with the Warriors. They've yet to lose at home. That could be jinxing them, but they've been pretty stout at home, and it seems like they have a lot of answers for whatever Dallas is going to throw at them. And what Dallas does in the offseason after this would be really interesting because they really can't afford Jalen Brunson, but I'm not sure how you let him leave. That being said, you also need depth at several positions because your center minutes, you're getting murdered, especially if you can get Kleba in any kind of foul trouble, because then you got to put Dwight Powell out there, and then suddenly you can't go 5 out on the offensive side. And then it hurts even more when Kleba's off like he was in the first 3 games because he's still the advantage over Powell. But if they have to shift out of that and go with an even smaller lineup, Like I don't even know what they do at that point. But Game 5 tomorrow night, we're all looking forward. I'm going to jump into the chat because maybe you guys have had some thoughts so far on the series. So Yuri McGarley says, hello, everyone. Mild Man, a comic nerd, says, hi, all. Jeremy Bowers was asking about a movie trailer. Well, it's not basketball related, as you state, Jeremy, so I'm going to move on. So Mild Man, a comic nerd, says, this has been the most interesting playoffs I've ever seen. All the rounds have been great. I haven't watched all the playoff rounds since I was in high school, 95 through 98. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it so much. This conference finals has been somewhat lackluster just because teams get out the leads and then hold those leads, and it's kind of no one's fighting back. But I agree, though. Playoffs as a whole, I've enjoyed thoroughly. So Yuri McGarley says, even if the Mavs are eliminated, which they probably will be, it was a great season for us. We knocked out the regular season, the best regular season team, and got further than anyone would think. Or anyone thought we would, rather. So Riley Pangrass is thankful for the NFL or NHL playoffs because this has been a blowout fest. All right, so some inner chat discussion. So Yuri McGarley says, Kidd has been a significant upgrade over Carlisle. Carlisle was too set in his ways, unwilling to make any adjustments, and player minutes were set in stone. Kidd is the complete opposite. Jason Kidd has been much better than I was anticipating because we've seen him now a couple times, and you're like, perhaps the transition from floor general to bench general isn't going to go as smoothly as we all anticipated for Jason Kidd, just because his basketball IQ was always through the roof when he was playing, and he could see what the defense was giving at all times and dissect it mercilessly, but was just out there as a coach on the floor. So you're like, he should be a good coach on the transition over. And he was, rough go at first. But this year, it has been really impressive to watch. And I'm happy for Dallas fans because I agree Carlisle was set in his ways. It's kind of like Doc. Certain things with Doc. It's like he's not going to play young players, just like Tibbs. I don't trust you until I trust you, but you can't get that trust without playing time, and I'm not willing to give you that playing time because you haven't earned my trust unless you're just crushing it in practice. And I think Kidd is more open to trying different things. Their defense has been much better under his stint than it was in Carlisle. And also, there comes a point where you need a new voice in the locker room. It is rare to have a Popovich or a Spo that stays for a very long time in one location. And for most teams and organizations, I think it's healthy to bring in a new voice and cycle it through because it's hard to maintain the respect and ear of your players if you've been there for long enough, because I would imagine it's easy to fall into the trap of, well, this is the way we did it with these guys. And be like, well, we're not those guys. So to change your approach to how you relate to them and scheme, Spo and Pop are the exception, I think, to the rule. Whereas other coaches, it's probably good that you're moving on. And Carlisle, let's see what you can do with Indiana. As a front office and ownership that is not willing to spend like a Cuban. But if you make it work there, it would be wildly impressive. All right, so let's flip over to the Eastern side because this is the series that I didn't really have any kind of handle on. I figure it goes 7, and I like the Celtics overall. But if Miami wins the next 2 straight, it's completely conceivable to me. I don't know what you're going to get night in, night out. Like Nathan Williams just joined the chat and says, who do you like tonight, Boston or Miami? I couldn't tell you. Who's going to show up? I mean, at this point, it's like if Tatum has a bad game, then you can guarantee his next game is going to be lights out. He's done it all playoffs long. So we have enough of a sample size now where we know the post-game presser, he's going to say, that was on me. I need to do more for my teammates, and I was way too passive. Next game comes out and crushes. But as a whole, overall, like if you look at the last game, right? The Heat hit 6 more threes overall. They shot a better clip from 3. They have like metrics of stats. They won quite a few of these different things. It's not like Boston just shredded them outright. Boston had they had the same number of turnovers. The real killer was free throws. That's it. Jason Tatum attempted more free throws than the Miami Heat on his own. But the Heat went 8 of 14 from the line, and the Celtics went 32 of 38. There's your difference. It was every call that the Heat got was off ball, and every call that the Celtics got was on a shot. And it's just like, boom, Celtics are going to the line. Oh, the Heat are in the bonus early, and now the Celtics are going to the line consistently. And honestly, watching that first half, I wanted to edit together a clip from Rise of Skywalker where Palpatine is walking past the clone tanks and there's Snoke, like all the various Snokes, and to turn the Snokes into Adam Silver, and it's just David Stern back from the grave, because that officiating was Stern-esque in that, listen, we need one of these series to go 7 games. So guess what? We are officiating that outcome because the Celtics were getting every call. And it's not like they weren't earned. It was a physical game because the previous game, game 3, Miami came out and punched them in the mouth. And the Celtics were staggered back and was like, we're just allowed to punch each other in the mouth. And by the time they came to that realization, Miami Heat punched them in the mouth again. And they were just stammering and stumbling backward the whole game. Miami just took to them. Played it physically, realized very early on in the game, the refs were not going to call this overly physical game to the degree that you would like a regular season game or even earlier in the playoffs. They're going to let them play. So the Miami Heat just like, okay, that's what you're going to do. That's what I'm going to do. And so the Celtics responded and they came out, but it was like, oh my God, every call on any kind of offensive foul is really favoring over and over here the Celtics. Now, there were injury issues for both sides, which there have been in this series. You had Hero and Smart both out. PJ Tucker is not anywhere near 100%. Right now, Smart and Williams are questionable tonight. And if they have both those guys out, man, oh man, the Celtics have a hill to climb. They're already operating in a deficit before the tip has even gone up tonight. If both those guys warm up and they're not able to go. But, I mean, it is hard to get any kind of lay of the land in this series. Because it is just flat out like it's our turn and then your turn. And then our turn and then your turn. it has not been all that competitive. It's like whoever's night it is, the other team has no chance because the other team is going to be completely off. And it's just this weird push and pull between the two sides. And like the Heat need Hero back because he gives them some more shot making and playmaking, even though he's a liability in other regards. But like I saw Heat fans somewhat rejoicing that Duncan Robinson hit some 3-point shots in the last game, even though the bulk of them were in garbage time minutes in the fourth when they were down by so much anyway. It kind of didn't matter. But you see the ball go in the bucket because it's been since game one of the playoffs in way back when in April to when he was consistent from three. So to grab onto that and be like, maybe he jumps back into the rotation. I mean, Oladipo came off the bench and outscored all the starters, which is the first time it's happened. I want to say that I read it was since 1954 or 1955. Like that doesn't happen where a bench player outscores every single starter. And it's not like Oladipo was lighting the world on fire. Like he had a good game. Didn't have some stellar game where you could be like, well, he put up 50 points. It's like, nah, he had a decent game, was a menace on defense again, and he has been like game 3, man, oh man, he was smothering, getting numerous steals, making guys earn it, jump balls. Didn't play in the first half. Butler goes down with the knee issue, comes in the second half, and it didn't seem to bother him, at least on court, that he didn't get any playing time in the first half. Just like, screw it. This is where you need me. This is where I'm playing. And really increasing his contract value because he's been hampered by so many injuries that next go around basically is just trying to prove to teams out there, A, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win, and B, I can still operate at the highest levels. And some team out there, I will be intrigued to see what they're willing to offer him. Because I could see teams convincing themselves that he could be second or third banana on a potential championship team. You could talk yourselves into that pretty easily. It'd come down to what the team is, but it's possible. But yeah, so I mean, like, is Grant Williams going to be a deciding factor? Because he's done it so far in the playoffs. If they're forced to play, if Smart has to go out, it means more time for Peyton Pritchard out there. But if Peyton Pritchard is out there, then the Heat are going to hunt him on pick and rolls and force him into defensive coverages that he just can't handle. I mean, he is great. Spark plug, come in, give you high energy, hit some clutch shots, and then go back to the bench. He is awesome at that. But if you need him to play huge minutes, to go from his like 20, 22-ish a game and bump that up to 28 to 30, he's going to get hunted quite a bit on defense. Now, Derek White played good in that last game, so it would offset maybe potentially needing to rely on Pritchard so much, but Pritchard has been, not Pritchard, but White has been up and down in the playoffs. Maybe now that he's got a kid, it's like that extra motivation type of thing. Who knows? But I think both sides have a lot of this where if we have a couple of injuries, now we're forced to go deeper into our rotation. And when it comes to that, if both teams suffer through needing to go through their bench deeper and deeper and deeper, well, don't you trust the Heat's bench more at this point than you do Boston's? Because once you get past Williams and Pritchard, now you're getting into Tice and Nesmith. And in reality, of those two, I kind of only trust Tice, but then you look at the numbers and he's getting shredded. Their offense is not nearly as good. Their defense is not nearly as good. And that's the player that I trust of those two. And that is a very shallow bench suddenly. Whereas with the Heat, so you have like, Jimmy's knee is still bothering him, but Hero is able to play. Okay, we got Hero, but you still got Oladipo coming up the bench. Gabe Vincent, who has proven to be a solid player. Caleb Martin. If Duncan Robinson is off the schneid, I would still be hesitant to play Dedmon, but Dedmon has to play to give Adebayo some spells of rest. But perhaps if Robert Williams is out, then suddenly Adebayo turns into that 30-point juggernaut that he's been when Robert Williams isn't out there. But I still think the Heat go deeper into that if we have one or two key guys go down. We've got more depth overall. Whereas with the Celtics, if they go out tonight and they have no Smart and Williams, well, I think the Heat are going to win, and quite handily. Because as good as the Celtics defense is, they are going to lose their switchability, which has been the key to their defense on a lot of levels. It's like you can put us in pick and roll. We're going to switch every pick and roll action, and you're not going to gain as much of an advantage as you would on other teams, especially if they were at full health. When you've got Horford in there and Horford's playing as well as he has in the playoffs this year, then their switchability is through the roof. They're not worried about you hunting out any specific matchup, because even if you get past that guy, they can rotate somebody else over and keep you honest, which they've done. In the pick and roll action, like with Horford, if Horford gets beat, Robert Williams has been sliding over to add added protection. And then the Miami, whoever the person that's forcing the action down into the paint, has to make a choice. And it's usually then the other Celtics jump into passing lanes, and they're going to have to throw a difficult pass somewhere. But you take Smart and Williams out of that equation, well, suddenly Tice is going to have to play heavy minutes, and so are Pritchard. And now, defensively, you can exploit. There's two weak spots right there, especially if they're out there at the same time. And then if you couple that with if Tatum has a bad to average game, like if those two guys are out tonight, Tatum needs to go off for 40. Or Tatum and Brown need to have 30 apiece. And that's just the state of it right now. But I don't know. To answer that is a long-winded explanation. I don't know. I like the Celtics over. If they were both teams at full strength, I like the Celtics. Their 7-man rotation, to me, is more dependable and reliable, because every person knows who they are and what they do for this team. And not to say that the Heat don't have that, but they've also had so much fluctuation with injuries over the course of the season that a lot of these guys don't have a tremendous amount of minutes together to establish that kind of team relationship that the Celtics have, because the Celtics have been together this group has been together for years. And even certain guys like, Tyson Horford, they brought back, but they still know Smart, Brown, and Tatum. So then you're just adding small guys on the fringes. Whereas Miami, it's, Butler and Adebayo and Hero. But then Robinson's not getting much playing time. And of the other guys getting playing time, it's newer faces in Kyle Lowry, in PJ Tucker, in Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin, and whoever else, however deep they want to go into that bench. So the institutional kind of aspect of the Celtics having played together for so long benefits them in that way, in my opinion. All right, let's jump back over to the chat. So Riley Pangrass says, Matt and gang, what's your best finals matchup now that we're this far? I think Heat versus Warriors, because I think the Celtics could dominate the Warriors with their size and defense. Well, I think the Celtics are the only team left, in my opinion, that could beat the Warriors. So if you're saying Heat Warriors, I don't think it's a walkover for the Warriors, but I think they have so many, offensive options that as good as Miami's defense is, and they would be able to take advantage of the fact that the Warriors turn the ball over. Sometimes it's a good play from the opposing defense, but a lot of times when you're watching, it's like, that is a terrible pass. That's a pass that me and my friends make on our pickup games. Like just a lazy, we're tired and it's game 5 or 6 today, and we don't think the opposing defense is actually going to try hard on this, so I'm just going to lazily throw this over here. But they do it a lot. And I think Miami could exploit that because they are so tenacious on defense. But the matchups, like when it comes down to it, and Miami needs a bucket, who are you going to? Like, Jimmy's nickname is Jimmy Buckets, and he could definitely do it, but not to the degree of, I would take Steph or Poole at this point over Jimmy, I think. I mean, it's close between Butler and Poole for me, but given the overall Poole can shoot from everywhere, Jimmy needs to get down within 12 feet, 15 feet to really be effective. So long as you take away the paint, I'm perfectly content with him shooting a 3. He'll make one every once and again, but he's a piss poor shooter. So I sag off of him, be like, go ahead. We're not going to let you do Jimmy things, which is muscle your way down into the paint, jump into a defender, draw a foul, deservedly draw a foul. I'm not saying it's cheap. He flies in there and he takes hits, and then he'll hang in the air and get a gorgeous contested shot to go in. Now it's a 3-point play situation. Jimmy's amazing at that. I love watching it. I kind of wish Ja would take some pages out of Jimmy's book into how he takes contact down low. I just fear for Ja long term, because one of these times he's going to land and roll the ever-living shit out of his ankle or something worse. And I don't want to see it. So, look at Jimmy. This is how he does it. I realize he's, bulkier. He's more stout than Ja. So I don't want Ja to bulk up in order to do that, because I think that reduction in fluidity would change who he is. But yeah, so I think the most competitive matchup to me would be the Celtics and Warriors, where I can see that one easily going 7 games. And I think without seeing the outcomes, I guess I would favor the Warriors just because they've been there. They know what these situations are like. But it's not to say that the Celtics could not easily win that series. And not easily sweep. I'm saying still 7, just it's conceivably possible that either team in that situation could win it to me. So mild-mannered comic nerd said he'd like to see Heat and Warriors too, but he's okay with Boston as well. But if he had to choose, it'd be Heat Warriors. Yeah, I got no problem. If Heat win it, awesome. It's a great story. It's a team that never tanks. They do not tank. And Spo keeps them legitimate every year. Even though the Riley goes out and makes contracts over the years that you're scratching your head at in the moment. The spending spree when they had a team that was Whiteside, Dion Waiters, and Johnson. Johnson killed me, man. That if anybody ever benefited from the cap spike, it was him. But yeah, they've had some bad contracts. Doesn't matter. They've expertly maneuvered and gotten guys via the trade market or unrestricted free agency or off the scrap heap. I mean, if you look at their roster, it's like Duncan Robinson, Martin, Vincent, Yurtsevin. They just get all these guys that are cast off. Strus, who I haven't even mentioned today, who's been fantastic. There's your Duncan Robinson minutes have gone to Strus. Miami is excellent at that, and I would be more than happy if they did it, because it's akin to Milwaukee. They built the bulk of this team up themselves. Now they went out in free agency and got Butler and Lowry and PJ Tucker and whatnot, but Bam is their guy, Hero is their guy, and all the other ones I just mentioned, and who are playing big minutes for them. So it'd be nice to see. It's a kind of a testament to that overall. The Warriors are, outside of Wiggins, I mean, everybody else is kind of a product of their system. Wiggins, Porter, Bielitsa, but everybody else, Celtics, a lot of the same. Tatum, Brown, Smart. Now they went out and they got Tice back, and they got Horford back, and they got Derek White. But Robert Williams is theirs. Grant Williams is theirs. Pritchard is theirs. So it's a bunch of teams where we didn't go out in free agency and coalesce this massive team and we had the budget to outspend everybody else. I much prefer the team building. We drafted, we built these guys up. We used our G League and got them run down there like a Middleton situation. And slowly but surely, as his confidence increased, so did the fate of our team. I think it's better for the NBA overall. Because if it's just year in, year out, which team is competing with the Lakers to spend the most money, and that is who's going to win, that sucks. Because then it's like, what's the point of having 30 teams? Soon to be 32, by the way. After the next media rights deal, looks like all signs point to Vegas and Seattle officially getting what has been the open rumor for the past 2 years. And then I'll be curious, because both of those are West Coast teams, who they're going to shift from the West over to the East. I think Memphis makes sense to go to the East. Maybe Minnesota. New Orleans definitely makes sense to shift over to the East. But yeah, plot those two in the West, shift 2 West teams over to the East. And now we've got 32 teams in the league. So Rashawn Robinson, swinging in late, a resident diehard Heat fan, and the disrespect on the Heat has been overwhelming. I am not surprised. Heat fans overall, it's been a common sentiment, just because the Celtics do get quite a bit of shine with Tatum and Brown. So Yuri McGarley says, what do you think of the All-NBA teams? Embiid down to the second with more points than Tatum, who's in the first. Trey qualifying for the Supermax by getting the third. Yeah, I agreed with the lay of the land on pretty much all of that. Personally, you can go back and, I did it as the last show before the playoffs started here on Dropping Dimes, and I kind of went chalk for what I was expecting. I knew LeBron would make it in, but I wouldn't have voted for LeBron just because your team didn't even make the play-in game. And so the numbers you're putting up are a good stats bad team. And why are we rewarding? If Brad Beal can't do that for the Washington Wizards, why can LeBron do it? And if you want to say it's a legacy thing and he's made it 17 other times, I'm not going to fight you on that. I just think if we're being honest with ourselves, and also it looks really bad in hindsight. with Booker getting a first team, because Booker was like, I did the same thing. It was like, you know what? The Suns deserve to have representation on this list. But then to watch them over those 2 rounds, just like, man, is that the heart of a champion? Because a lot of people want to slag off on, the MVP. Now all top 3 MVP voters are gone. And we've got, Doncic and Tatum and other guys that were further down on the ballot still in this. And that to me is different, because if you watch those, like, those dudes were still trying their ass off and playing as best they could and trying to get their teammates in. I mean, Embiid played through 2 season-ending injuries, one more so than the other. The thumb thing, affected your shot, and yet still hitting free throws, still doing what you can. He was more passive afterwards, which is understandable because he got knocked in the face even with that mask. If you remember that swat on the ball that went directly into his mask and he instantly crumpled down to the ground, like a fractured orbital bone. It's got to be so painful. But like Jokic was pretty much the only thing keeping them in this series. Giannis without Middleton was still like, I am going to do everything I can to crush you. And then just looking at that first team with Booker and be like, boy, that game 7 against the Mavericks put such a sour taste in my mouth. So Riley Pendergrass says Draymond's 1 free throw miss last night was something. Yeah, it was. I don't know that I've ever seen that. And if you didn't see it, he shot the ball and it missed, but it bounced on the back iron and then rested on that little itty bitty shelf between the rim and the backboard that attaches the rim to the backboard. That little, like 3 or 4 inch tiny shelf. And it just rested there. So much so that Luka turned to him and smiled, said something, and Draymond kind of smiled back. Even though the Warriors were losing, there was nothing you could do other than be like, what the hell is this? This is crazy. Yeah, that was a weird one. It was a weird game overall. The roof is spilling water in like nobody's business. Like I stepped out for the opening 5-10 minutes of halftime to finish making my dinner, which my wife had started on. And I was basically just like making my version of it, and then sit down at my laptop and watch the game. And by the time I sat back down, there's this discussion of there's going to be a delay. And then they started doing all this stuff in the middle of the delay. But it was a weird game overall. It reminded me of that finals game with the Spurs and the Heat where the AC just went off. It's just a weird malfunction that could have a massive detriment to the product overall. But yeah, it was a weird game. And Rashawn saying Jimmy Butler didn't make the All-NBA. He played 1 less game than LeBron. And I was already personally just not in favor of LeBron after playing 56 games and his team not making it in. Yes, Jimmy played 55 and they're the number 1. I agree. Neither should have made it in. I think the Heat not having a representative is unfortunate, but with Butler and Bam missing a decent chunk of the season, this was kind of the inevitable outcome. Because it was a mash unit for the Heat overall. So who would you have if you're not going to have one of those 2 guys that played enough games and was impactful enough to knock one of these other dudes off? It doesn't exist, in my opinion. So had Jimmy gotten to like 60 games, yeah, he would have made it on. But the fact that, I don't know, Simmons brought up a good point of, for stuff like this, maybe there needs to be a minimum games or minimum minutes played. And I think that's true. Just give us some sort of easy quantifiable, because there is if you want to be the scoring leader, LeBron didn't hit the metric to be considered because he didn't play enough games. So the same thing, like for who makes All NBA or MVP or any of these end of season awards, debate it with the players union and hammer it out and put it into the CBA and basically codify it into law. So that way there's less uncertainty about who potentially could make these. And because it can have huge effect on supermax deals that players can be offered going forward. And it'll have massive differences in player legacies and how we view them. You can easily go back and look at the stats of, well, so-and-so made X number of all NBA teams, and how many first teams, how many second teams, how many thirds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you created something in there as opposed to the intangible sports writer having to figure it out on their own, because when you go and look at the ballots, and you can find it at NBA.com, they put up the point totals for the various awards to see how many first place this person got and second place that person got. But then you can go in and they have a spreadsheet of the ballot by ballot, who voted for what. And you look at some of these and you're like, did you watch a lot of games? Like in the all defensive, the defensive player of the year, much as I love him, Alex Caruso got a first team vote. When he played, I agree with you. Had he been able to do that for 82 games, no brainer. That dude to me is in the discussion, if not an automatic starter at the guard for all defensive team. He missed too much of the season. Shouldn't even been in consideration. His vote actually, I think, is the one that stymied Marcus getting a unanimous first team. It's just so strange. I think that ballot had Caruso and Chris Paul as their 1-2 for the guard position, which I'm not saying neither is worthy of consideration for the defensive team, but I wouldn't have gone two straight. Last question, we'll get out of here. Knost, what do you think about the NBA lack of days off during a playoff series? It's weird, isn't it? When you're watching it, I'm so used to the Stern method of, hey, we may go, Tuesday, Thursday, but then you're off until Sunday. And these series take 2 weeks, which I was never a fan of. But a little bit more time off might improve the product on the court, and we wouldn't have as many blowouts. I don't know. There's been a bunch of injuries this year. So perhaps like at some point in this, they go game 1, 2, they take an extra day off. Game 3, 4, they take an extra day off type of situation. I don't know. I'd like to see how it plays out and then look at it from a more macro view once we've seen it all. Because I do like this is over, like they're playing every other night and it's systematic and you understand that, as opposed to seemingly before, unless you really knew the NBA, it seemed arbitrary, but it's like, they want to get games on specific nights, Sunday night being one of them. Certain nights of the week, the NBA prefers to have games on as opposed to every night of the week. And I am a fan of I like this every night of the week, as it's currently constructed. But does it make for a better product on the court? Probably not, especially this late. And I think the bigger killer is on the travel days. So after game 2 and game 4 and then the 1-1-1, to have to travel and then immediately play, I think could lead to more injuries and player fatigue and just a worse product overall. But anyway, that's it for Dropping Dimes today. Thank you to everybody that joined in the chat. I appreciate it. It was a lively discussion overall, and even guys like Rashawn swinging in late. So long as you came and enjoyed, it makes me all the more delighted. But that is it. You can follow me at Matt Knost. Make sure to subscribe to the show and leave a comment, like the video, or if you listen on, podcast, whatever your app of choice is. I know Apple and Spotify allow for reviews. So please leave a review. I'd really appreciate it. But that's it for this week. I'll see you guys next week when we'll be in the heart of the finals, or at least the start of the finals, rather. Until then, stay safe out there. Talk to you soon. Adios.